again.
We are back once again with the Renegade Master, Shaun Dunn. Say hello.
Hello there.
My name is Jimmy, and I know we said we were going to do shorter podcasts, but like always, we don't know how this one's going to work out. So we have a big question for today, and it's partly Formula One related, but partly sports in general, British sports in general, I should say, and it is Lewis Hamilton the greatest British athlete in all of sports?
First of all, is obviously the question: is he the GOAT to Formula One? That's the question we've got to answer first.
That is the question.
Because if he's not, then can he be?
We should amend that to say: is Lewis Hamilton maybe the? No, you know we'll talk.
Is he a GOAT?
Yeah, is he a GOAT?
Is he in fact an actual GOAT? Is he a real life?
Is he a real GOAT? Well, the way his beard is growing. You're the F1 expert. I'm a casual fan.
I'll say expert.
Compared to me, you are the F1 expert. You are the one that does all the Twitter F1 stuff. So you are the F1 expert.
Hang on. I'm not just does all the Twitter stuff in general.
You are the Twitter. He's the Twitter guy.
It's not just everything that goes on. Well, apart from the podcast episodes.
Yes.
Anything else?
I've given Shaun control of the Twitter account while I deal with the YouTube. But let's go back to the question: is Lewis Hamilton the GOAT of Formula One? Shaun Dunn, what do you think? Or is he in the picture?
Of course, he has to be. He's definitely in the conversation just because. So a couple of weeks ago, he obviously took the record for the most race wins of any single driver, taking that off Michael Schumacher, which had for a long time. And then, as of recording this weekend, just gone with the Turkish Grand Prix, he's just equalled Michael Schumacher's record of World Championship titles, which technically now makes him the most successful driver of all time because he has the same number of championships and more race wins. So he's definitely in the discussion. There's no doubt about that.
I know you said he has to be like, if he's not the GOAT of Formula One, then he can't be the best British athlete. But he can be, because if we put Michael Schumacher up there as the GOAT of Formula One, he's not British. So he could still be up there as one of the best.
The problem is there's the big argument just because you have a lot of people who go all the way back to Jim Clark as well, who was British, so there's many arguments. There's a lot of people who go against Hamilton. Yeah, let's say that for various different reasons. A lot of them having nothing to do with his racing ability.
Well,
there are obviously a lot of people who come back and go, well, because of the development in technology and everything, that they try and say that drivers nowadays have it easy compared to former racing drivers,
right?
Which is a whole debate in itself, obviously. So you can have that because Jim Clark does come up a lot in these conversations of just how much more difficult it was back then to drive the cars, which is it's a yes and no argument because obviously they have a lot more technology now, which helps them and have better and like more refined setups and everything. But at the same time, all this technology has also made the cars a lot quicker, which inherently makes them more dangerous. So you have both sides of it.
Yeah. I mean, if you want this completely casual, I don't watch every race. I haven't really watched much at all this season. But I would consider, as someone who's not obviously a massive follower of the sport, either Michael Schumacher or Lewis Hamilton to be the greatest of all time. But that's a casual perspective. I always want Hamilton to win, or I always want someone British. Like at the moment, we've got Lando Norris, who is an up and coming, star. He may reach that pinnacle one day, or he might sit in the middle of the pack. But for me, Hamilton he's also more than just. I think this is something we can discuss later on, but he's more than just a Formula One driver. You know, he's more than just the man who's equaled the record. He's got such persona outside of football, outside of Formula One as well. That I mean, some of it good, some of it bad.
So
Can
obviously
be
that's
debated.
part of it that some people try and then use against him. But,
Yeah, but like he's a
but
man who he stands up against, like, you know, hate, racism, something you need more of. And we can bring up other big British athletes later on to discuss that. But it depends. Are we taking that into account when we bring in like stuff like this? Like, or are we just talking about like their talent in their specific sport? So like, obviously Lewis Hamilton, he does have the best car that you can get in Formula One, but he also has to be a fantastic driver to handle that car, you know.
so I think obviously people use that a lot against him of the he has the best car,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously you're forgetting that one, to get in the best car you have to be a good driver. The top teams don't just sign anybody. Like you have to prove that you are a good driver to get into those cars that and those teams to want you. You can't just walk it. Like so, let's say Nicholas Latifi, who currently drives for Williams, if in a couple of years Hamilton decides to retire and Latifi's still not scoring points, they're not just going to sign Latifi.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're going to take somebody else who has proven themselves in another car.
Yeah.
So people, yes, he's obviously the past couple of seasons, and well, I say a couple. Mercedes have had a dominance now for the last 7 seasons. So they have had those good cars, but he was doing it before then. You can see clips of him in karting or when he was in GP2 that he had the talent before then as well. So it isn't just a case of he has the best car. That definitely helps. But he had to have proved himself along the way to have got to the position to get in that car.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. It's not just about the car; it's about the man driving the car. If you put me in any car, I wouldn't be able to do it. So
it is very funny looking through Twitter, all these people trying to argue against Hamilton and trying to say that the cars effectively drive themselves and anybody can get into it and do it. And it's just not true. Like, if you hear anything or listen to any interviews from people within the team, they're saying that the drivers are constantly telling them like how the car feels in certain corners so that it's always being updated, and the drivers are doing so much. And the way Formula One works is that if there is any technology that comes in and massively benefits a team, they ban it.
yeah.
So yes, there are all these computers that work on the cars that gives them data, but it doesn't drive the car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're still fairly basic. Of you have your engine, your 4 wheels, your gears obviously now on a stick, they're on floppy paddles, and you have the other thing of your ERS and your DRS now, everything. But again, they don't drive the car for them. They just enhance the car's ability. The driver's still got to have a lot of skill, as showed this weekend, where Hamilton and Bottas have the exact same car. Hamilton started from 6th, went on to win the race. Bottas ended up way back in the grid after spinning about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
So you've still got to have that talent to be able to drive the car. And this was exceptional circumstances with the conditions, with the track and the rain and everything. But the experience and the talent of Hamilton really shone through, that he was able to do what he did, whereas other experienced drivers and even his teammate who has the same car as him couldn't do it.
Agreed. So we'll go back to the question then of, is he the greatest of all time in Formula One?
My final, I do want to play devil's advocate myself though,
Okay.
which people have a lot of arguments against him. Some of them kind of valid, a lot of them not. The only one that I think has like the biggest validity to it, which I haven't seen a lot of people say, but I did see that if you look at Schumacher, and I believe this is right, if it's wrong, someone can tell me. That's not a problem. But Schumacher was never beaten to a title by his teammate.
Right.
In his career, whereas Hamilton was beaten by Rosberg, who had the same car as him.
Could
So you
that
could argue,
could that not also be a sign of times changing, where all these different cars and technologies, are all improving, so that's more likely to happen now than it was back then? Or
well, I was then going to counter myself again
go on.
because that season Hamilton did have reliability issues,
Yeah,
which obviously helped Rosberg a lot, but it was still quite close. And Rosberg did, so there's obviously that part of it that you could argue that had Hamilton have not DNF'd in those races, that he probably would have gone on to win that championship as well.
yeah. I mean, this
But
this is a case of Lewis Hamilton. Um, right now, he could be considered by many to be the greatest of all time, but he's close to it regardless. But he's a man that has so much ahead of him. He could be doing this for another 10 years, like, and he's already equaled the most championships won. So there's no doubt in my mind that he will become the greatest of all time if he continues at this pace.
personally, I think he has to be, just because the main argument that people turn and have is that if you were to shove him in a car from 20 years ago, he won't be able to do what he does today.
Yeah.
But that's an invalid argument, because you could say the same that if you were to put a driver from 20 years ago into a car today, they wouldn't be able to do the same as what they did back then, because they were good at racing that car.
Yeah.
It's the same as when you're trying to compare footballers, saying that a lot of people now trying to go, oh, the footballers today are nothing like they were 20 years ago. It's like the game's changed. Those players were very good at playing that style of football, but the style of football has now changed. It's the same in race driving, that the ability you need as a driver has changed what you need to do.
Right.
And that there's no point trying to nitpick and go, oh, well, the other drivers had it harder or whatever, if they try and do that. But they are the best at what they have. Hamilton doesn't have to go and drive a car like it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
He has to be good at the car he has now. So, and he's done that better than anybody else.
Who's to say he wouldn't be?
12 years.
Who's to say if you did put him in a car 20 years ago, that he wouldn't be at the standard he is now? No one knows that necessarily. But like, he can adapt. There's different. He might have trained differently. You never know.
But I think that's also what makes this conversation for people who, not the outsiders who aren't Formula One fans who look in and have their other issues with Hamilton, but ones who are and know about the sport, is that you'll never have a definitive answer. So that you can argue, and you have these different perspectives that you can look at, and that's the greatness of it.
Well, in that case, we'll move on to our big question then. Is Lewis Hamilton one of, if not the best British athletes of all time? And I guess you can say, who would you add on to that list? Who would be on that list? And what would you do? Would you put it on influence? Would you just put it on talent? Like, would you count people like who haven't had the best careers, but are people that have made an impact elsewhere? I'm trying to think of someone now. Marcus Rashford. He's not the greatest footballer of all time. He's not the greatest British footballer of all time. But stuff outside of what he's done has made him such a brilliant person, and he's such an influence in football now because of that. And he'll influence people to get into football because of that. But that doesn't make him the greatest, one of the greatest British athletes of all time. But would that be the case with other people, depending on what they've done? Or who would you put on? Give me someone who's a British athlete that you put on that list, if you can think of one.
See, that's the thing. I'm struggling to think of someone who has consistently dominated as much as he has over his time. Obviously, he had the brief spot where Red Bull just dominated Formula One, but over the past 12 years, no one has done as much as he has in terms of wins, races, and championships.
Yeah,
and I can't think of any in the sport. You probably your main one will probably be someone like Phil the Power Taylor in darts for the dominance of like championship wins, because he had a lot. You have Stephen Hendry in snooker, also.
Andy Murray. If you,
yeah. I don't think he hasn't won enough though.
But he's still one of the greatest British athletes of all time, right? Surely you've got to have him in that list.
Hang on. I just want to check something.
Go on, check it. I'll keep on talking. I'll keep entertaining the crowd. But like you were saying, he's won so much.
Sorry, Andy Murray cannot be in the conversation. He's won 3 Grand Slams in his career. 3.
Okay, if that's your opinion, that's your
nothing.
Opinion. That's fine.
In tennis, that's nothing.
That's fine. If that's your opinion, that's fine. But I'm saying, is that it's the same with Lewis Hamilton? Is there a better British tennis player ever? I'm not a massive tennis.
But I think the problem is that when you look at Hamilton, he's dominated everybody else from around the world. Mm-hmm. Murray never did that. No point where you like, because admittedly you've had a very competitive tennis scene for the past few years when you've had Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, that they were also insane, but he was not really, personally I wouldn't put him anywhere near those. Whereas Hamilton, if you put any of the drivers of the past 10 years, you're probably going to put him on top of them.
Yeah, we want to
say that he absolutely dominated them.
We should probably say right now, there are going to be many people we miss out. We're doing this off the top of our head. We might finish this podcast and realise...
We should have done research.
We should have done research. But we're lazy. No, we're not lazy. We are. But but we just sort of came up with this idea right now. And we're like, this is, while it's fresh in our heads, we want to talk about it and just see what a natural conversation would bring out. But it's like, I'm looking up a list of people right now. You can go greatest British athletes, Olympian route. You can do Mo Farah. You can do Chris Hoy. There are so many people you can do. Anthony Joshua. Tyson Fury, if you go in boxing, both of them. If you want to go football, who's one of the top English footballers right now? Harry Kane. I wouldn't put him as one of the greatest of all times, but he could be. You know, if he takes us to a World Cup, he could be. If you consider anyone from the England '66 squad from the World Cup win, you can do.
So I think the problem is when you look at the sports, you have people who have done very well in those sports, but none who have dominated as much as Hamilton has.
If we're talking modern...
That's the difference.
Yeah, if we're talking modern football... I keep going back to footballers. I've still got the box office in my head. If we go back to modern athletes, Lewis Hamilton has to be the greatest or one of the greatest. There's no saying he's not. That he's up there. He's in top 5 if he isn't if he isn't the top. You know, there's no saying he's not. He's dominated in his sport. I know people argue Formula 1 isn't a sport, but you know,
it definitely is. It definitely is.
It is classified as a sport, so
also
it's a
the
sport.
People that turn and go, you just sit in a car. That's ridiculous. Like the stresses they have to put through their body with G-forces and everything, and the fitness a Formula driver has to do.
Yeah,
is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like people who say it's not a sport, but then would you count biking as a sport? Would you count like people who do the Tour de France? Like, is that not a sport? Chris Hoy, cyclist, sport. They're all you could do it in the Olympics.
The same thing of the 2012 cyclists is that if they didn't have the bikes they had, would they have achieved it? Yet people don't really seem to bring that up.
Yeah, so like it's not a sport in the conventional sense that you're not kicking a ball around. No, if that's all you like about sports, then you're not getting the point of sports. But yeah, in my personal opinion, I believe Lewis Hamilton is one of, if not the greatest of all time in terms of British athletes or sportsmen, to be specific.
So I'd have to agree. That I just don't think anyone comes close to him because no one has done it on the level that he has.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Like I'm sitting here as someone who doesn't like. I'm not someone who watches every single sport in the world. I'm not someone who keeps up with rugby and stuff. I don't think you put a rugby player over Hamilton at this point. But like, I'm a big football fan, as are you. And would you, off the top of your mind, if we keep it more modern, would you put any footballer in the time period that Lewis Hamilton has done what he's done, like ahead of him at all, or anyone close to him?
For British, not at all.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there are other foreign players that obviously at the top of the game. You think of the Messi's, Ronaldo, that's dominated for years, probably the same level. But British-wise, no, there hasn't been a single one that's done it at the high level.
You can make an argument.
Got the trophies for it.
You can make an argument that some have been top athletes, but not top. You can say like David Beckham, not just for what he's done for football, football in England, but football around the world. What he's doing in America now with Inter Miami, what he's done as an influential person. A lot of people look up to David Beckham and wanted to get into football because of him. You could say that brings him up to the top. But like, in terms of like dominating a sport, David Beckham didn't dominate a sport. With United, of course, United were pretty dominant, but that was a team effort. It wasn't David Beckham dominating the sport. Lewis Hamilton, while there's a team behind him in Mercedes, he's the driver. He's dominating the sport.
At the end of the day,
if he crashed that car, they would win.
To him.
Yeah. So, you know, if David Beckham went off the pitch with an injury, someone else could come on and do a better job. If Lewis Hamilton crashed the car, that's a DNF. He's out. You can't just get someone to replace him, get into the car and drive off. That's not how it works. And I feel that that's the difference. There's a lot to it. You can't discredit his team. You can't discredit Mercedes, and all of their pit staff and everything that goes inside and everything to do with Formula One. But he is one of, if not the greatest of all time, and I've said that like 5 times now. But we're hammering down the point.
And I think, to finish it off, the fact that he won it this weekend as well, I think just helps him as well in that argument of, because all of this season, the whole thing has been he's had a much more dominant car, and we haven't had a wet race all year until last weekend, so no one was really tested other conditions. And the way that he started 6th, he had a good start to the first lap, but then dropped all the way down, and then was able to work his way back through that top field. And also the way he managed his tyres and the experience that he had, it really showed in this race, because you had other people who weren't as experienced, who made mistakes, like Verstappen. He's a very good driver. He's very quick, and he showed that all through practice, qualifying, apart from that very last session where there was the change in tyres. He was miles quicker than anybody else. During the start of the race, he was miles quicker than anybody else. But the inexperience caused him to make a huge mistake, whereas Hamilton didn't do that. He didn't try and lunge down the inside in wet conditions that he wouldn't be able to control. Yes, he made a couple of mistakes, but at the end of the day, his experience came through, his driving ability came through, and that was that in the end is what won him the race. You had the team radio all the time where near the end of the race they were debating whether dry tyres were better because the track was drying out. Then they thought more rain was coming, so they thought about bringing him in for a safety stop to put on a new set of inters. And it was Hamilton's decision to go, no, I'm staying out. I'm using these tyres, even though they were worn down massively. His intermediates effectively became slicks. But he was able to control the car still. He was able to do everything that he needed to do. And ultimately, that driving ability that has won him so many titles shone through in this race. And I think was the perfect way for him to win this title. Not just in he started on pole, he went off from the first corner and won the race by a mile. He had to work for it, and his driving ability was shown in there.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think we both agree that he is maybe the greatest of all time in terms of British athletes, and not much else we can say about that, can we? Should we say anything else, Shaun?
Well, I just want to add on to it, because we're talking about Formula One, because I haven't seen a huge number of people talk about it. You have no idea what I'm going to say. Makes it really funny. I'm going to go on a slight bit of a rant. It was in qualifying on the Saturday, Q2. Well, end of Q1 into Q2. Had a car go over, Tiffy's car, I believe, and that's been the tractor on to recover it. And basically, this whole thing is a fuck the FIA because it was in horrible conditions. The track was already slippery before it was even wet. It then rained in qualifying. The tractor was still out on track, and they started the next session, and it's fucking ridiculous. And nobody, none of the official people seemed to pick up on it or mention anything. It was everyone else on Twitter and stuff like that afterwards actually were really saying stuff about it, where they left this tractor out on the track, and it wasn't that long ago. It was only 6 years ago, I believe, that's how Jules Bianchi died. And after that, Daytona said, this will never happen again. We never want anything like this happen again. We'll change everything. And they haven't. And 6 years later, that could have, and because of the conditions, that was the most dangerous condition we've seen in a long time, that something easily could have happened again.
Yeah.
Because, so the argument was, the race director came out and turned and said, he gave the green light for the session to start because the people on the ground said that they'd be done by the time, and they were only on an out lap, so it'd be fine. And by the time they were coming for their flying laps, it'd be sorted, which is ridiculous because even an out lap on a Formula One car is ridiculously fast. They're not driving around at 20, 30 miles an hour like on a normal road. They're still doing hundreds of miles an hour around corners, especially around, because where it was on turn 8 is one of the fastest corners on the track, that if somebody was to slide off and something had gone wrong in the recovery, that it took them slightly longer, that could have been a huge accident. And I just because a lot of people weren't talking about it, just want to say fuck the FIA for that, because that was ridiculous. And the fact that they didn't even apologise for it, say they were wrong for it, they came out and backed themselves and said, yeah, we agree that we still believe we should have done this. It was stupid.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end it. You ranting about something or other. What can we say? Lewis Hamilton, great. We'll say it one more time. Greatest of all time in terms of British athletes. Yes or no, Sean?
Yes,
okay.
Definitely. For me.
I agree. All right. Good. Have a nice and subscribe, like, share, all of that good stuff. Sean, I'll let you plug the Twitter. Go on.
If anyone wants to talk Formula One, just come talk to me.
Exactly.
I'll happily talk to people about Formula One. I've like Jimmy had been a casual fan for a long time, but this season really got into it. Everyone wants to challenge me on what I said today as well. Please do it.
Yeah, he wants
at me.
He wants to be attacked. Attack it, no. But yeah, keep up with our socials, and we'll get back to you if we see it.
Follow the Twitter. Follow the Twitter. That's where the good stuff's at.
Exactly.
That's where I'm in charge. That's where the good stuff's at.
Wow.
Follow the Twitter.
Follow the Twitter.